the night did not welcome her. It roared with fury, as though the skies themselves had joined in the mockery of her downfall. Black clouds pressed low over the Roman marketplace, heavy with rain, and each thunderclap cracked like the sound of judgment. Lightning bared its teeth across the heavens, spilling light upon the square below, where men and women crowded beneath dripping cloaks and sneering masks. The air smelled of wet stone, burning oil, and the sour breath of cruelty. And there she was, Liora. Her wrists bound, her ankles bruised, dragged forward by guards who shoved her into the open like spoils of war. She stumbled but did not fall. Even with mud spattering her skirts and iron biting into her skin, she forced her chin up, refusing them the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. She did not belong here. This was the place for thieves, traitors, and broken things, souls to be bartered beneath the weight of the crowd's laughter, auctioned off like cattle, stripped of dignity until they forgot they had ever been human. But she was no criminal. She was no traitor. She was a maid. A servant who had swept the grand halls of her Alpha's palace, scrubbed marble floors until her hands bled, polished silver until her reflection blurred with tears she never let anyone see. And yet, tonight she was branded with shame. The accusation still rang in her head, betrayal. They said she had betrayed her pack, whispered lies into the ears of their enemies, stained their name with secrets she had never even known. A lie as sharp as any blade, wielded by those who envied how her kindness had earned trust, how her quiet hands had healed wounds that others ignored. Now she stood among the condemned, forced into the line of shame, rain soaking through her thin dress, hair clinging to her cheeks like strands of sorrow. The crowd jeered. "Look at her," someone spat, voice cutting through the storm. "A servant who thought herself more. She should be whipped, not sold," another sneered. Liora kept her eyes fixed ahead, refusing to flinch, refusing to let them see the tremor in her chest. Her heart was breaking, but she would not gift them her tears. She had learned long ago that tears fed the hunger of cruelty. So she pressed her lips together and tasted salt, whether from rain or from pain she could not tell. But within her, beneath the terror, beneath the shame, something stirred. It was faint, almost forgotten, yet it burned, silver flame. A hidden power she had never asked for, never mastered, a dangerous inheritance whispered of in secret. It licked at her ribs like an ember starving for air, reminding her she was not as helpless as she seemed. And though she had buried it deep, tonight it throbbed awake, restless beneath her skin, urging her to remember. She closed her eyes for a moment, just one, and she felt it flicker like a secret heartbeat. But she smothered it quickly. She dared not let it rise, not here, not now, not while chains bound her wrists and eyes swarmed her every move. The auctioneer's voice rang out, cruel and commanding. "Tonight," he bellowed, "we offer the condemned to the mercy of those who dare to claim them. Tonight, justice is swift, and the guilty will be owned, punished, or discarded." Liora felt the words coil around her throat like ropes. She was not guilty, yet the mob's hunger did not care for truth. To them, her silence was proof, her servitude weakness, her shame a feast. She wondered if this was how it ended for her, nameless, traded for coins, forgotten beneath the weight of her own false disgrace. But the storm would not allow it. The storm beat harder, as if the sky itself raged at her fate, and through the crowd's roar, through the auctioneer's theatrics, through the crash of thunder, something else stirred, a whisper of destiny. For tonight, the grand ball awaited. 100 princesses had gathered from every corner of the kingdoms, each adorned in silks and jewels, each hungering to be chosen by the Alpha King. They would dance, they would charm, they would fight for his hand, for the crown, for the power of being his queen. But Kaelen, the Alpha King, had already decided. Not that the crowd knew it. Not that the princesses understood. Not that Liora herself could have imagined it as she stood in chains. For in the eyes of her enemies she was worthless. A maid. A girl fit for scrubbing floors, not ruling empires. A servant accused, thrown among the ruined, her worth measured in whispers and mockery. But in the eyes of the Alpha King, she was something else. Something the world was not ready for. The night quivered, and the storm did not relent. The lightning illuminated her face once more, and though she hid it, though she refused to show them, the ember inside her chest beat against the darkness like a promise. Liora's fate was not to end in chains. Her fate would burn. And before this night was done, the world would remember her name. If you want to see how love rises out of ashes, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where every heartbeat tells a story. The staff rose into the air, polished wood gleaming under the flare of torches. The auctioneer's hand trembled with greed, his voice booming above the storm as he prepared to strike it against the block and begin the sale. The crowd leaned in as one. Faces twisted with hunger and disdain. Some licked their lips, as if savoring the humiliation about to unfold. Others shouted bids before the staff even fell, their eagerness dripping with venom. 2 silvers for the maid. She's not worth a copper. I'll take her for sport, then throw her to the dogs. Their laughter broke against the stone walls, sharp, cruel, filling the air like smoke that choked every breath. Liora kept her head high, but inside her chest, panic clawed with desperate hands. Her bound wrists throbbed. Her body trembled with cold, but it was not the rain that made her shiver, it was the truth pressing against her bones. No one here would see her innocence. No one cared for her story. To them she was already condemned. The staff began to fall. And then, silence. It swept through the square like a blade, slicing through laughter, cutting down jeers. The crowd froze, voices caught in their throats, eyes darting toward the great arch at the edge of the marketplace. A figure stood there, half shadow, half light, framed by the storm as if the heavens themselves had parted to mark his arrival. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Cloaked in black that shimmered faintly with gold embroidery, rain sliding from the fabric as though it dared not touch him. Power rolled off him in waves, heavy, commanding, making the air itself bow. Kaelen. The Alpha King. The marketplace that had moments ago roared with cruelty now trembled with reverence. Men who had shouted insults lowered their eyes. Women who had sneered clutched their cloaks tighter. The guards straightened as though their spines were yanked by invisible chains. But Kaelen did not look at them. He did not look at the auctioneer, who swallowed hard and froze mid-motion, the staff suspended uselessly in the air. He did not look at the noblemen shifting nervously or at the princesses gathered in jeweled gowns, their painted smiles faltering as they tried to gather his gaze. His eyes were fixed only on her. Golden. Burning. Unyielding. They pierced through the storm, through the crowd, through the shame that bound her. Liora's breath caught. The world fell away. She heard no thunder, no rain, no voices. Only the sound of her own heartbeat crashing in her ears, pounding as if it sought to break free of her chest. He knew her. Not in the way one knows a servant's face from passing, not in the way one knows a name spoken in casual orders. His gaze held recognition. Depth. As though he had seen her long before this night, as though he had been searching for her through shadows only he understood. Her knees weakened under the weight of it. She forced herself to stand straighter, but she could not tear her gaze away. His presence was a tether, a command stronger than the chains at her wrists. The crowd shifted uneasily. Whispers broke out. Why is he looking at her? He's here for the princesses. Isn't he? He can't mean, no. Not a maid. But Kaelen stepped forward, boots striking against wet stone, each movement deliberate, unhurried, as though time itself had slowed to make room for him. The storm seemed to bend around his figure. The torches burned brighter when he passed. The auctioneer stammered, bowing clumsily. Why, your majesty, forgive us. We did not expect. Kaelen raised a hand, and the man fell silent, lips trembling. His voice, when it came, was steel wrapped in fire. Smooth, commanding, laced with a power that rooted itself in the marrow of all who heard. Release her. 2 words. They struck harder than thunder. The guards froze. The crowd gasped. The staff slipped from the auctioneer's hand and clattered to the stone, forgotten. Liora's heart stuttered. Did she hear him correctly? Release her? The Alpha King, the ruler who could have claimed any princess, any noble bloodline, had spoken for her? The guards hesitated, eyes darting between Kaelen and the councilmen in the crowd, unsure whose wrath they feared more. But Kaelen's gaze shifted to them, golden eyes hardening, and that was enough. Their hands scrambled at the chains, fumbling to undo knots, to slip iron from her wrists. The moment the shackles fell, Liora felt the weight of her shame shatter. Her skin burned where the metal had bitten her, red marks scoring her flesh, but the ache was nothing compared to the sudden flood of air in her lungs, the sudden clarity in her chest. She lifted her gaze, and met his eyes once more. The world stopped breathing. Fear tangled with something else. Something dangerous. Something she had no right to feel. Trust, unbidden. Longing, sharp as hunger. She should have looked away. She should have dropped to her knees, thanked him, lowered herself as every law demanded. But she couldn't. His gaze held her like flame holds dry wood, consuming, inevitable. Kaelen did not blink. He did not look away. His eyes roamed her face, not with the cold assessment of a king evaluating his subject, but with the depth of a man recognizing a truth he had carried within him long before he stood here. He spoke again, softer now, though his voice carried over the square. Liora. Her name. On his lips. The sound of it was both salvation and sentence. He had not asked who she was. He had not demanded introduction. He had spoken her name as if he had always known it, as if it had lived on his tongue long before tonight. Her throat tightened. No one here had spoken her name without scorn since the day she was accused. Hearing it now, shaped in his voice, was almost unbearable. The whisper spread like fire through the crowd. He knows her name. How? She's a servant. What is happening? But Kaelen did not hear them. Or if he did not care. His eyes remained on her, unwavering, fierce, unshakable. And Liora, trembling, bruised, soaked in rain, felt her walls crack. For the first time in years, something inside her shifted. Not the dangerous silver flame that burned at her core. Something else. Something softer, but no less terrifying. Hope. She should not feel it. She should not want it. But it was there, blooming wild in her chest, threatening to undo her silence, her resolve, her very sense of who she was. The storm raged on. The crowd held its breath. And in the space between them, fear, trust, and forbidden longing sparked into life, a flame too bright to ignore, too wild to be denied. The square held its breath. Chains fell from her wrists, clattering against the stone, and though the sound was small, it reverberated through her skull like thunder. Freedom should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like exposure, raw, dangerous, merciless. Every eye in the marketplace was on her now, and for the first time since she had been dragged here, she wished for the comfort of her shackles. At least they had been something to hide behind. Her gaze stayed locked on Kaelen, and yet even as his golden eyes held her steady, the storm inside her mind broke loose. Memory surged, sharp as blades, unrelenting as waves, dragging her backward into the shadows of her past. She remembered the night the pack had cast her out. The council's circle, torches burning, faces painted with suspicion. The Alpha at that time, Kaelen's predecessor, his jaw carved in stone as he spoke the words that had shattered her life. Too dangerous. Too unstable. Too much fire in her blood. Her power had revealed itself without warning, a silver flame flaring to life in her palms when she had tried to save a child from a collapsing stable. She had not meant for it to ignite, had not even known it existed, but the blaze had consumed more than the falling beams. It had lit fear in every watching eye. And fear, she had learned, was heavier than any chain. They had not seen the girl who risked herself to protect another. They had seen a curse. A threat. So they banished her. She had left that night with nothing but a threadbare cloak and her mother's voice chasing after her in whispers. Liora, your heart is not a weapon. It is a gift. Remember this when the world tries to make you forget. But memory bends under weight. And hers had bent until it broke. She had spent years convincing herself her mother was wrong. That her heart was not a gift but a flaw. That kindness was weakness, that nurturing hands meant nothing if no one wanted them, that fire in her blood was a curse better hidden than born. A maid may serve, but never rule. The words had been thrown at her more times than she could count. Spoken by masters who pressed buckets into her palms, sneered when she scrubbed floors on raw knees, mocked when she looked at the world with eyes that still searched for beauty. She had clung to them like scripture, teaching herself not to want more, not to dream, not to believe she could ever rise above the dirt she cleaned from marble steps. And yet here he was. Kaelen. Looking at her as though none of that filth mattered. Looking at her as though he saw the girl beneath the grime, beneath the shame, beneath the accusations and exile. His gaze reached past every wall she had built, and in its glow she felt bare, undone, dangerous again, not because of her fire, but because of what he might awaken if she let him. Her stomach knotted. She wanted to turn away, to fold herself small, invisible, as she had trained herself to do in order to survive. But his presence disarmed her. The very air seemed to bend toward him, pulling her with it, refusing to let her retreat. Her throat ached with unshed words. She wanted to cry out, "Why? Why do you look at me that way? Don't you see what they see? Don't you know I am unworthy?" But no sound came. Only silence, heavy, suffocating, carrying her deeper into memory. She saw herself kneeling at the edge of a battlefield, hands stained with blood that was not hers, pressing cloth to the wounds of wolves who would never thank her. She had not fought in those battles, maids were not warriors, but she had picked through the aftermath, searching for those clinging to life. She had cradled them, whispered comfort, stitched flesh together with trembling fingers. She had done it in secret, because kindness was seen as waste, and no one valued the touch of a servant's hand. Yet she had done it anyway. Because that was who she was. Because some small, stubborn part of her could not smother the flame of compassion, no matter how much the world tried to snuff it out. And now the Alpha King stood before her, seeing not the servant, not the exile, but something else. Something even she could not name. Her heart thrashed against her ribs. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to step forward, to meet the fire in his gaze with the ember in her chest. But fear clawed louder. What if he was like the rest? What if this was a trick, a cruel jest to see how far the fallen maid would fall if dangled hope for the first time? What if she let him in, only for him to expose her, to rip away what little she had left? She trembled under the weight of it. Every instinct screamed at her to bow her head, to lower her gaze, to shrink before him like the servant she had been taught to be. But another voice rose too, the voice she had smothered for years, the whisper of her mother, the whisper of the fire in her blood. "You are more than they say." Her lungs burned as though she had run miles. Rain clung to her lashes, cold against the heat of her cheeks. The world blurred, past and present tangling, memory and moment colliding, until only one truth stood clear. Kaelen was not looking at her like the others. He was not looking at her as though she were dirt or danger. He was not looking at her as though she were a tool to be used or a burden to be cast aside. He was looking at her as though she was seen. And that terrified her more than chains ever could. The crowd stirred uneasily, whispers darting through the air, but they were distant, muffled, as though her ears no longer belonged to them. All she could hear was the pounding of her heart, the echo of her memories, and the impossible weight of his gaze. Her lips parted, though no words came. What could she say? What language existed for a girl who had only known rejection, now staring into the eyes of a king who threatened to undo every lie she had told herself to survive? She wanted to ask him why. She wanted to demand what he saw when he looked at her. But fear sealed her tongue. Still, somewhere deep in her chest, buried beneath scars of shame, something fragile began to stir. Not fire. Not rage. Longing. Longing for the possibility that she was wrong about herself. That maybe, just maybe, she was more than what the world had called her. And for the first time since her exile, since the council's decree, since the whispers had carved her name into chains, she let herself wonder. What if she was not cursed? What if she was chosen? The storm broke just as the palace doors opened. Rain, relentless on the marble steps, hissed as torches flared to life, drawing all eyes toward the grand hall where the ball of 100 princesses was about to begin. Liora's skin still carried the cold of chains, her wrists raw where iron had dug deep, but now she was thrust into a different kind of prison, the shadows of Kaelen's palace, hidden behind velvet drapes, ordered by guards to remain unseen. She did not belong among royalty. She knew it. Every part of her screamed it. Her hair was still damp from rain, her plain dress clung to her skin, and mud stained her hem where she had stumbled in the square. She was nothing beside the glittering wave of silk and gemstones spilling into the hall. The princesses entered like a storm of colors, emerald, ruby, sapphire, gold, each one groomed to perfection, each one smiling as though their beauty could blind the Alpha King into choosing them. Their gowns shimmered beneath chandeliers, their jeweled crowns reflected firelight, and every step rang like a proclamation, "I am worthy. I am chosen." And Liora was hidden. Out of sight. The music swelled, strings and horns rising in triumphant chorus, echoing off marble pillars and painted ceilings that told the stories of kings long dead. Banners unfurled above the hall, Roman in their grandeur, red fabric stitched with golden wolves, symbols of conquest and dominance. It was a spectacle built to impress, to remind every heart present of Kaelen's power and lineage. But the Alpha King himself stood apart. Kaelen did not move as the princesses bowed and fluttered their fans, as laughter echoed, as whispers of competition sharpened into daggers. He did not smile at their polished beauty. He did not glance at their jewels. He did not even shift his weight upon the dais. His golden eyes scanned the hall, steady, unreadable, and when they passed over the draped shadows where Liora stood, her knees weakened. He had commanded her freedom, but he had not commanded her presence here. She should not have been brought. She knew that. And yet, as the firelight grew restless around her, she began to feel as though she had been summoned by something older, something deeper than royal decree. Because the flames bent. At first it was subtle, almost unnoticeable, a flicker that leaned away from the hall's grandeur and toward her hidden corner. But then it spread. Torch after torch wavered, their fire tilting, their smoke curling as though pulled by unseen breath. Heat pressed closer to her skin, not burning but beckoning, and though she clutched the drape in trembling fists, the truth pressed against her ribs like a blade. It was happening again. The silver flame inside her, the one she had tried to bury, was no longer silent. It stirred, restless, alive, answering something she could not name. Her pulse thundered. She pressed herself back against the stone, desperate to remain unseen. But shadows betrayed her, thinning as though the light itself wanted her revealed. And then came the whispers. Not human. Not of flesh and bone. They slid through the hall like wind through reeds, threading beneath the music, curling into every ear that dared to listen. The child of the flame. The child of the flame. Liora's breath caught. She had heard those words before, whispered in half-forgotten lullabies her mother sang when she was small, tales dismissed as superstition, too dangerous to repeat aloud. She had buried them, just as she had buried the fire in her chest. But now the hall remembered. Gasps spread through the crowd as the words clung to the torches, weaving themselves into flame. Smoke curled into shapes, sigils of fire and wolf, symbols older than kingdoms, older than Kaelen's throne. The prophecy. The air thickened. Even the princesses stilled, their practiced smiles faltering as the torches bled their secrets. The hall's magnificence seemed suddenly frail, a stage too small to hold the weight of destiny. And in the silence that followed, the words were spoken, not by any tongue in the hall, but by memory itself, echoing through stone and bone alike. From the hands of the lowly shall the true Alpha Queen rise. From the ashes of scorn, fire shall crown her. She who is unseen shall bind the Alpha's blood and flame. She who is cast aside shall awaken the pack's destiny. Every syllable struck Liora like a blow. She staggered, pressing her palm to her chest as though she could still the wild beating of her heart. The prophecy was not about her. It couldn't be. She was a maid, an exile, a girl who had scrubbed floors while others fought wars. She was not flame. She was not crown. But the fire within her thought differently. It surged, rising in her veins until her skin glowed faintly, a shimmer only Kaelen seemed to notice. His eyes narrowed, sharp, unyielding, as though the puzzle of his own fate had just snapped into place. The crowd erupted into chaos. The prophecy, voices shrieked. It cannot be her, others spat. A servant? Impossible. The princesses recoiled, clutching their jewels as though they might protect them from words older than their thrones. One of them screamed, pointing toward the shadows where Liora stood trembling. There. She hides there. The cursed girl. Liora flinched, stepping back, but the drapes no longer sheltered her. Flames bent wider, torches blazing in unison, casting her in a merciless glow. She was exposed, fragile, her plain dress no shield against the weight of 1,000 eyes. Her lips parted, a denial forming, but the words died on her tongue. Because she felt it. The prophecy was not a lie. It was not coincidence. It was not a cruel trick to humiliate her. It was her. She could hear her mother's voice again, soft, trembling with love. You carry fire in your blood, my child. Not to destroy, but to heal, to bind, to lead. Her legs threatened to give way. She shook her head, muttering to herself. No. I'm no queen. I'm no one. But the flames hissed against her denial, roaring louder as though rejecting her fear. And Kaelen did not look away. He descended from the dais, each step heavy with command, his presence cutting through the panic like a blade. The hall fell silent at his movement, every princess trembling, every noble watching, every torch bending closer as though pulled by his will. And when he reached the floor, he did not address the jeweled women who had traveled from kingdoms afar. He did not speak to the nobles whose whispers festered like smoke. He walked straight toward the maid they had all cast aside. Toward Liora. Her back pressed against the stone, every instinct screaming to run, to flee before the weight of the prophecy crushed her. But her feet would not move. The fire in her blood pinned her as firmly as chains had hours ago. Kaelen stopped before her, close enough that she could feel the storm in his breath, close enough that the gold of his eyes blazed brighter than any flame. His voice was low, steady, unshakable. You are not no one. You are the one. The hall trembled. The prophecy hung between them, alive, undeniable. And though Liora's heart screamed with fear, though her lips whispered denial, though her body shook beneath the weight of a destiny she did not want, her soul burned with truth. She was flame. And the myth had awakened. The silence after Kaelen's words lasted no longer than a heartbeat. But a heartbeat was enough to ignite a war. It began with laughter. Sharp, cruel, desperate laughter spilling from the throat of a rival alpha seated near the front of the hall. He was draped in wolf pelts, his chest scarred with battles won in blood rather than honor, his teeth bared not in amusement but in threat. The sound cut through the hall's tension like a blade, dragging others into its orbit. Soon whispers swelled into jeers, jeers into open mockery. A maid, one voice spat from the crowd of princesses. A servant girl, unwashed and unworthy, sneered another. Would Rome itself crown a gutter-born handmaid as queen? The rival alpha roared, stepping forward, his bulk shaking the very floor. Has the great Kaelen grown so blind with madness that he would spit on the throne he swore to uphold? The words struck like whips. Gasps rippled through silks and jewels, the princesses clutching each other as though contamination had entered their midst. They stared at Liora not as a woman, but as a plague. Liora's body trembled. Shame and terror burned her skin. She wanted to disappear into the stone, to fade back into the shadows where no eye could follow. But there was no hiding now. The torches bent toward her still, fire betraying her even as it marked her. The rival alpha did not wait for Kaelen's reply. He raised his voice higher, snarling to the crowd, his words dripping with venom. This is no prophecy. This is manipulation. A curse planted in our king's house. Look at her, mud clinging to her dress, chains still fresh on her wrists. This is the fire that will save us? This trembling rat of a maid? His words were met with a chorus of growls and shrill voices. Other alphas stepped forward, their eyes dark with ambition, their pride stung by the idea that a king might choose someone lower than them, lower than their daughters, their sisters, their carefully groomed heirs. The princesses, painted in gold and jewels, hissed like vipers. Their rehearsed smiles shattered into snarls, their beauty twisting into hunger for blood. Cast her out, one cried. She is no queen, shrieked another. Their voices merged until the hall shook with their fury. Kaelen's jaw tightened. He did not raise his voice. He did not yet move. But his silence was a weight, a gravity pulling every gaze back to him, waiting, fearing, daring. His eyes remained fixed on Liora, and the steadiness in them was a fortress she wanted to trust, but terror gnawed through her ribs. Then the shadows moved. At first it seemed the flames themselves had birthed them, long, coiling shapes that slipped across the floor, crawling up pillars, seeping into the very breath of the hall. Then eyes opened within them. Glowing, feral, unholy. Wolves not born of flesh but of darkness itself. Descent given form. Enemies of prophecy summoned by the weight of fear. The hall erupted. Claws tore into marble, fangs flashed in firelight. Torches fell, their flames spilling across silken gowns, igniting chaos. Screams split the air as princesses stumbled, jewels scattering like shattered stars. Rival alphas shifted in flashes of bone and sinew, their wolf forms filling the hall with snarls and fury. Kaelen moved then. His power tore through the chaos, his shift thunderous, his form towering, shadow and flame coiled in muscle and fur. His roar shook the hall, sending weaker wolves sprawling, silencing all who dared oppose him. He was the Alpha King, and no one could mistake it now. Yet even as he fought, claws clashing, fangs tearing, his gaze flicked back to Liora. Always back to her. Liora stood frozen, every instinct urging her to flee, to run from this nightmare. But the prophecy's fire anchored her, trembling in her veins, begging her to rise. Still, fear clawed deeper. Each time the shadows lunged, each time a wolf's snarl snapped close to her, she felt the crowd's hatred like teeth in her skin. And then the voices turned sharper. This is her fault, shrieked a nobleman, his face pale with terror. She has cursed the hall, cried a princess, clutching at her torn gown. She brings ruin, another screamed. The mob's fear twisted into blame, all of it hurled upon her. Liora's knees buckled. Her chest burned with denial, but no words could form. It was always the same, her presence branded as danger, her gift twisted as curse. Once more she was the outcast, the scapegoat. Once more they wanted her gone. The High Council rose, their robes heavy with authority, their voices booming over the din. Remove her, one decreed, his finger stabbing toward her like a spear. Exile her now, commanded another, his face carved of stone. If she will not leave, she will be executed where she stands, came the final, merciless word. The decree slammed into her like a blade. Liora staggered back, breath catching, heart splintering. She had known she did not belong here, but hearing it spoken by the highest authority, seeing the crowd's eager agreement, it stripped the last fragile thread of hope she clung to. Her eyes darted to Kaelen. He fought still, his claws drenched in shadow blood, his form wreathed in firelight. But his eyes met hers even amidst battle, golden and tormented. Torn between the crown that chained him and the bond that pulled him toward her. For a breath, the world held. The clash raged around them, wolves tearing at shadows, flames scattering jewels, but all Liora saw was his gaze. A silent war inside him. Duty against desire. Throne against heart. And in that single glance, she knew. He could not save her without betraying everything. And yet, he could not let her fall without betraying himself. The weight of both choices pressed upon him, visible in the hard lines of his face, the tension in his stance. His roar shook the hall again, not in rage, but in anguish. And Liora felt the fire inside her answer. It screamed for release. It burned against her ribs, begging to rise and fight back. But she clenched her fists until her nails cut skin, forcing it down. If she unleashed it, they would call her monster. If she held it, they would call her curse. She had no place. Nowhere to run. No crown to cling to. Only the torment of being chosen in a world that wanted her destroyed. The command of exile hung heavy, sealing her fate, even as Kaelen's torn gaze promised something else, a war not yet lost, a bond not yet broken. And the hall, drenched in firelight and blood, waited for what choice would be made. The villa stands in silence, half-broken pillars reaching into the night sky like the bones of a forgotten god. The moon rests low, its silver glow spilling across shattered mosaics and ivy-wrapped walls. Liora sits upon a crumbled stair, her face buried in her hands, the remnants of tears cutting pale streaks down her cheeks. The weight of the world presses her small frame into the stone, yet the flame inside her still flickers, faint but unyielding. Kaelen approaches with deliberate steps, his presence filling the broken hall as though it were his throne room. His armor glints faintly, smeared with the blood of the clash he just endured, but his eyes, those stormlit eyes, are fixed solely on her. He does not hesitate. He kneels beside her, lowering himself to her level, as if the Alpha King himself could afford humility only in her presence. His fingers brush against her arm. She flinches, not because of the touch itself, but because it threatens to shatter the walls she has spent her life building. The warmth of his hand bleeds into her skin, pulling her back from the abyss she thought she was destined never to escape. "You should not be here," she whispers, her voice splintered between defiance and surrender. "They'll come for you if they see us together." "Let them come," he answers, voice low, carrying the unshakable weight of command. "I faced armies, torn through packs, stood alone against those who doubted me. But the thought of you walking into the dark without me," his jaw tightens. "That I cannot endure." The words pierce her more deeply than claws ever could. She wants to believe him, yet the echoes of her past rattle like chains. The pack casting her out. The words, cold and cruel, unfit, cursed, unwanted. Even here, with Kaelen's hand against her skin, she cannot silence them. He notices the tremor in her body, the way her lips part as if to argue but no sound comes. So he does what few ever dared. He reaches higher, brushing away the tear that lingers just beneath her eye. The gesture is gentle, reverent, like a vow he has yet to speak. "You see my scars," he says, baring his forearm where the jagged ridges of old battles mar his flesh. "Every one of them tells a story of survival, of pain endured, of battles I should have lost but didn't. But what are scars worth if I wear them alone?" His gaze locks hers, unyielding. "I want you to know them. I want you to know me." Her breath catches. No one had ever asked her to know them, not truly. They demanded she serve, demanded she stay silent, demanded she disappear. But Kaelen demands she exist. "I am not who you think I am," she says at last, her voice trembling on the edge of confession. "The prophecy, the whispers, they're not for me. I am nothing more than a shadow cast at the edge of their firelight. You'll lose everything if you keep me in your sight." Kaelen shakes his head. "You are wrong." His hand drifts toward hers, and for a heartbeat she doesn't pull away. "When I look at them, I see crowns, jewels, and titles. But when I look at you," he leans closer, his breath warm against her cheek, every syllable drawn from his chest like a promise. "I see truth." The space between them thins. Their lips hover, close enough for her to taste the heat of his breath, close enough for her body to shiver with the ache of what might be. She wants to close the distance, yet fear coils tight around her ribs. Fear of what it would mean. Fear of surrender. Her whisper fractures the silence. "Why me?" "Because," he says, voice ragged, raw with something primal, "I see you, Liora. All of you. Not the maid, not the exile, not the flame they fear. You." Her body trembles, caught between the yearning to lean into him and the instinct to flee. She feels the burn of destiny pressing on her shoulders, the unseen threads of prophecy tugging at her skin. If she steps into this moment, everything changes. The path ahead would not belong to him alone, it would belong to them both, bound in ways the world is not ready to accept. She closes her eyes, forcing air into her lungs. The night is quiet, yet the silence feels alive. His heartbeat thunders in her ears. Her own pulse races, a frantic drumbeat of terror and desire. "Trust me," he says. The words are softer now, almost broken. Not a command. A plea. Her lashes lift. She looks at him, at the man who could rule nations with his strength, yet kneels here, vulnerable before her. A shiver rolls down her spine. Her lips part, trembling around words that may never be enough. "If I do, there's no turning back." His hand closes gently over hers, the contact sparking through her veins like lightning. "Then let there be no turning back." The weight of the moment swells around them. The ruins, the moonlight, the silence, all fade until there is nothing left but the heat between their joined hands and the question burning in the air. Can she trust him, truly, wholly, with the pieces of herself she has never shown? Her chest rises, falls, her every breath sharp and shallow. The choice teeters before her. To run, as she always has. Or to step into the fire, knowing it may consume her. The flame inside her stirs. And still, she cannot yet decide. The palace hall swelled with tension, its marble pillars lined with torches that bled gold over silken gowns and jeweled crowns. The air pulsed with perfume, arrogance, and whispered wagers. 100 princesses arrayed themselves like weapons, each gleaming with the polish of ambition, their eyes fixed on Kaelen as though he were not a man, but a throne incarnate. The final bid began, delicate voices layered in flattery, promises of dowries, boasts of kingdoms they could fuse with his. Each curtsy landed like a claim of ownership, each smile sharp as a blade. Yet his eyes did not linger on them. They kept sliding, unbidden, toward the shadows at the edge of the hall, where Liora stood silent, her plain gown a stark defiance against the ocean of silk. The council moved then. A ripple cut across the hall as elders stepped forward, their robes heavy with insignia, their faces carved in stone like judgment. Their voices rose, woven with false gravity. "She hides among you," one declared, pointing toward the dim corner where Liora lingered. "Blood not of nobility, but of danger. A cursed lineage unfit for crown, unfit even for servitude." Gasps spread, hissing like serpents through the hall. Liora froze, her body rigid, every breath stolen from her chest. Another elder raised a scroll, its edges ancient, its words etched with prophecy. "Hear the truth. The child of the flame shall not save, but destroy. If crowned, she will tear the packs apart, burning bond from bone, trust from tribe." His voice cracked like a whip. "This maid is no queen, she is our ruin." The princesses turned, their painted smiles curling into sneers. Laughter rippled cruelly, cutting through the chamber like shards of glass. "She thought she could walk among us," one hissed, jeweled fingers clutching her fan. "A servant dares dream of a throne," another smirked. The crowd's murmur grew into shouts, then into chants, ugly, bloodthirsty, demanding exile, death, punishment for daring to exist within their sacred halls. Kaelen stood unmoving at the dais, his chest a cage for a war he could not still. His knuckles whitened against the edge of his throne, his jaw set in steel restraint. His heart thundered against the chains of his crown, demanding he leap forward, demanding he tear through the lies. But the council's eyes burned into him. The weight of generations of rule pressed on his shoulders, whispering of duty, of stability, of power that must not be risked for the sake of one girl. Liora's breath shook in her lungs. The floor beneath her felt alive, trembling, ready to swallow her whole. Every mocking laugh stabbed her deeper, every glare a nail in the coffin they had built for her long before this night. She searched Kaelen's face, desperate, pleading, though no words left her lips. And he hesitated. That hesitation was a blade sharper than any spear. Her chest cracked with it, the pain flooding in, raw and merciless. Her vision blurred. The whispers of her mother's voice returned, once soft in childhood, "You are more than they believe." But now it twisted under the echo of the council's decree, destroyer, cursed, unworthy. Her legs moved before thought caught her. She turned, the marble cold beneath her slippers as she fled. Through the sea of silk and jewels, through outstretched hands that shoved her, clawed her, shoved her lower still. Their jeers followed her like hounds. "Run, servant! Run, fire witch!" The torches flared as she passed. The flames bent unnaturally, straining toward her, pulled by something deeper than wind, deeper than will. She broke through the grand doors into the night, her chest heaving, her throat torn by sobs she refused to let break into sound. And then, something within her cracked open. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, the years of silence, they erupted. Her blood ignited, veins burning as though silver fire coursed through them. She fell to her knees, palms pressed to the stone courtyard, and the world shifted. A light burst from her chest, fierce, primal, undeniable. Flames poured from her skin, not red, not gold, but silver, radiant as moonlight yet blazing hotter than any forge. They shot skyward in a torrent, splitting the night, painting the heavens with their brilliance. The entire city gasped as the sky itself seemed to burn with her. The silver flame arced outward, kissing rooftops, curling around statues, but leaving them unscorched. It was not destruction, it was revelation. The prophecy twisted by the council shattered in that instant. This was no ruin. This was power unchained. Inside the hall, the crowd fell into stunned silence. The princess's sneers froze. The elders' words died on their tongues. And Kaelen's heart roared to life. His eyes widened, his chest heaved, and the hesitation that had bound him broke. The silver blaze carved into him a truth he could no longer deny: she was not their end. She was his beginning. But outside, Liora trembled in the aftermath of release. The fire still shimmered across her skin, flickering in her hair, burning in her eyes. She stared at her hands as though they belonged to someone else. Terror and wonder clashed within her, warring for control. Her whisper broke the night. "What have I done?" And though her voice was small, the world had already heard her louder than thunder. The palace had not yet recovered from her blaze when the air shifted, sour, heavy, crawling with dread. The silver glow still lingered in the sky, burning like a scar, but beneath it rose a deeper darkness, one that swallowed torchlight and silenced breath. The first sound came like metal dragging across stone, chains, thick and rusted, clattering in rhythms too deliberate to be chance. The crowd turned, eyes darting to the edges of the Colosseum-like hall, where shadows lengthened unnaturally. They slithered across marble and coiled around pillars, twisting into forms that did not belong to this world. Wolves emerged, massive and snarling, their fur matted with darkness itself, their eyes hollow voids. Each step shook the floor. Each growl carried the weight of forgotten wars. Bound in chains of shadow, they were not free, yet not enslaved. They were summoned, wielded, creatures torn from the depths of a curse older than any crown. Screams erupted. Princesses scattered, gowns tearing as they fled behind columns and guards. Elders barked orders, but their voices quivered under the sheer force of what stood before them. Soldiers rushed forward, their spears gleaming, only to be torn aside as though made of paper. And in that chaos, a voice split the night. Not Kaelen's. Not the council's. Hers. Liora returned. Her plain gown was torn, her face streaked with rain and tears, but her spine was unbroken. The silver flame pulsed from within her like a heartbeat magnified, her every step bending shadows away from her. She moved through the hall as though she had walked there 1,000 times before, her presence undeniable, her fear burned to ash. She stepped into the very center of the storm, into the Colosseum's heart where wolves clashed and humans faltered. Her voice rose, clear and steady, piercing the madness like a blade. "I am not your sacrifice." The words struck the air with force. The crowd stilled, caught between disbelief and awe. The wolves paused, their growls caught in their throats, as if the chains of shadow around them strained under her defiance. Her chin lifted, eyes blazing silver fire. "I am your queen." The declaration shook the stones beneath their feet. Torches flared to life as though bowing, their flames bending in her direction. The very walls seemed to tremble with recognition, ancient carvings groaning awake from centuries of silence. Then the fire came. It did not consume her, it crowned her. Silver flames burst across her shoulders, coiling down her arms, wrapping her in armor no metal could forge. Her hair lifted in the blaze, glowing like molten threads. Around her, voices whispered, not mortal voices, but echoes of the ones who came before, ancestors long gone, their oaths carried through bloodlines. They spoke not in language, but in resonance, each syllable vibrating in bone and marrow. Rise, child of flame. Her body shifted. It was not the half-shift of angered wolves, not the painful snapping of bones into fur. It was something far older, something fluid, as though the flame itself sculpted her anew. Her eyes widened, her muscles tensed, and her very silhouette blurred between woman and wolf, the fire bridging the divide. Her claws glimmered silver, her fangs like shards of moonlight. And yet, she remained herself, human and wolf, flesh and spirit, both and neither. The marketplace outside trembled, stalls rattling, clay jars cracking open, olives spilling like marbles across stone. The ruins stirred as though an earthquake had torn through them, dust falling from columns long thought dead. Statues of forgotten alphas, weathered by centuries, tilted their heads in eerie acknowledgement, their stone eyes glowing faint silver. The chained wolves dropped to their knees. Their snarls dissolved into whimpers, their heads bowed low, not to Kaelen, not to the council, but to her. And from the shadows stepped the true enemy. The air chilled as he emerged, tall and broad, his cloak dripping with night itself, his face carved with scars of old wars. His eyes glowed, not golden like Kaelen's, not silver like hers, but black, endless, void of light. His presence drained warmth, his aura thick with a power that tasted of rot and forgotten graves. He moved forward slowly, savoring the silence his arrival demanded. The wolves in chains lifted their heads toward him, torn between loyalty and the pull of Liora's flame. Pathetic, he said, his voice low but carrying through the Colosseum with poisonous clarity. This is the child the prophecy crowns? This trembling maid who believes herself queen? His smile was jagged, bitter. They lied to you, girl. You are no salvation. You are mine. The council gasped. The name tore itself from one elder's lips like a curse. Draven. The forgotten Alpha. Cast into shadow ages ago for crimes too dark to name. His existence had been buried in myths, his lineage erased, his hunger chained beneath centuries of denial. But here he stood, no myth, no shadow of memory, real, breathing, hungering again. Liora's pulse hammered. Fear quelled inside her, but the flame surged higher, answering not her terror but her defiance. She stepped closer, her silver blaze meeting his void like lightning clashing against storm. You will not claim me, she said, her voice steel-edged with fire. He chuckled, the sound curdling the air. Claim you? No, girl. You are already mine. Born from the ashes of betrayal, forged to finish what I began. He spread his arms, the shadows at his back writhing like serpents. It was my blood that twisted into yours. My curse that gave you flame. The crowd recoiled, their cries rising again. The princesses shrieked, some fainting, others clutching at guards who could not protect them. The council shouted denials, their voices cracking, their lies unraveling before their very eyes. But Kaelen did not move. His chest burned with the weight of revelation, his golden gaze locked on Liora. She stood, flame against darkness, light against void, the very balance of destiny quivering between them. And in that moment, his loyalty was no longer to his crown, nor to the council, nor to tradition. It was to her. The hall shook as Draven's wolves lunged. Shadows snapped their chains and surged forward. But so too did the silver fire, exploding from Liora's form in waves, not burning them, but cleansing, breaking darkness from fur and bone. Each wolf freed turned, snarling not at her but at the shadow that had bound them. The battle had begun. But deeper than the clash of claws and flame, deeper than the roar of war, one truth rang clear: Liora was no one's sacrifice. She was no servant to destiny twisted by fear. She was the queen the prophecy had promised, not because of her blood, nor because of the power she wielded, but because she chose it. Because she claimed it. Her fire raged, her body lifted by it, her voice cutting through the night like the strike of fate itself. I am not your ruin. I am not your weapon. I am not your sacrifice. The silver blaze roared higher, a pillar splitting the heavens. I am your queen. And as her words shook the Colosseum, the ruins, the marketplace, the very bones of the land, Draven's smile faltered for the first time. The fire dimmed, but its echo clung to the air. Smoke curled upward in ribbons, weaving through the shattered Colosseum arches, carrying with it the heavy scent of scorched stone and ash. Wolves crouched in the ruins of battle, their chests heaving, their eyes wide and unsettled. Every ear twitched toward the woman standing in the center, the maid they had scorned, the exile they had mocked, the servant they had deemed unworthy. Now she stood wrapped in the silver glow of a power none could deny, her skin still trembling with the aftershock of fire that had cracked the sky itself. And yet, silence crushed in. The crowd did not cheer. They did not kneel in celebration. Instead, the weight of 1,000 stares pressed against her flesh like knives, as though each gaze carried judgment too heavy to bear. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? The unspoken question lingered in every heartbeat, pulsing through the fractured hall like a drum. Whispers darted through the shadows, tongues struggling to shape words that felt like blasphemy. A maid. A queen. A curse. A savior. Children peered from behind their mother's skirts, eyes wide not with admiration, but with terror, as if her glow might consume them too. Elders hid their tremors behind clenched fists, unable to decide if they had witnessed the rise of a legend or the birth of their own end. Is she salvation, or destruction? The line between prophecy and fear blurred, carved not by truth, but by the eyes of those too small to understand the fire standing before them. Kaelen moved first. The Alpha King, whose crown weighed more tonight than in all the years he had borne it, stepped into the circle of her flame. Dust clung to his dark hair, blood streaked his chest, his jaw was cut open by battle, but his gaze never faltered. He reached for her hand. The gesture was not kingly, not ceremonial. It was raw, unguarded, human. His calloused fingers found hers, trembling slightly, not from weakness but from the enormity of what it meant. And in that simple act, the world tilted. Gasps erupted. Cries broke from the crowd. The council shouted warnings, their voices cracking under the weight of tradition breaking apart before them. No. She is the ruin. She is the flame that will undo us all. But Kaelen did not release her. His hand tightened, steady, as though anchoring her against the tide of hate, as though daring the world to pry them apart. And she, Liora, looked up at him. For a heartbeat, her flame wavered, the doubt pressing in. She saw the fear in the eyes around her, the whispers already naming her destroyer. She felt the sting of old wounds, the echo of voices that had always told her she was nothing but danger. But then there was his hand. His warmth. His defiance. The fire steadied. Still, the world's eyes burned against them, scorching hotter than any flame she could summon. In the ruins of that silence, the question rose again, not from her lips, not from his, but from the story itself, curling into the minds of all who had borne witness. Would you stand with her? Would you call her queen, or curse her flame? Would you choose her side? The night did not answer. The wolves did not answer. The people did not answer. It was left hanging, sharp and raw, a wound in the heart of every soul who had watched the maid rise to something more. And as that question burned into the silence, the voice of the tale leaned close, soft as a secret, fierce as a vow. If this story burned a spark inside you, if her fire stirred something in the quiet corners of your own soul, then subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where every tale is written in fire and heart, and where no story leaves you untouched. The silver flame flickered, the handclasp held, the stares pressed in. And the story stopped, hanging on the edge of breath. The ruins smoldered behind them, each fallen column and shattered archway glowing faintly with the memory of silver fire. Liora's hand was still in Kaelen's, her pulse frantic against his palm, though her steps carried the weight of unshakable defiance. The world had seen her, truly seen her, and the echoes of awe and terror still hung in the charged air. She lifted her chin, refusing to bow to the whispers curling like smoke through the Colosseum's broken halls. But the earth did not grant them peace. It trembled beneath their boots, a low groan that rippled through the stones as if the ancient city itself rejected silence. The firelight dimmed, swallowed by a creeping chill that unfurled across the floor. Kaelen's grip tightened. He had felt battlefields turn cold before death swept across them, but this was different, older, hungrier. The shadows gathered at the edges of the ruin, sliding along the cracked marble, pooling in hollows like black blood. A voice stirred within them, smooth and terrible, each syllable vibrating through the marrow of the earth. She is not the only one. Liora froze. The declaration coiled around her like a chain, colder than steel, crueler than prophecy. Her flames flickered, guttered, then fought against the darkness as though the very air pressed against her chest. She looked to Kaelen, and in his gaze she saw the storm breaking. Fear laced with defiance, confusion sharpened into rage. The voice deepened, no longer a whisper but a proclamation etched in stone and shadow. The true Alpha has yet to rise. The words struck like a blade. For all her defiance, for all her silver fire and the legacy now burning in her veins, the ruin itself seemed to deny her claim. The prophecy had not ended with her coronation cry, it had only twisted into another trial. Kaelen stepped forward, placing himself between her and the darkness, though his heart pounded with the same question tormenting hers. If not her, then who? If not now, then when? The shadows rippled, shifting into the suggestion of a figure, tall, broad, its form neither wolf nor man but both. A specter of dominance, its eyes gleamed with an ancient hunger, something that made even Kaelen's wolf recoil. Liora felt it, too, her flames licked higher, silver tongues defying the encroaching dark, but for the first time her power did not feel infinite. It felt tested. It felt watched. Her lips parted, but the words would not come. The ruin quaked again, dust sifting from the vaulted remnants above. The figure's gaze burned into her, into Kaelen, into the very bond they had only just begun to forge. Was this a rival to her claim? A shadow of the past returned? Or a herald of the war to come? Liora's chest rose with a sharp breath, her eyes locked on the abyss forming before them. Every instinct screamed at her to step forward, to demand the truth, to burn the voice into silence with her flame. Yet Kaelen's hand pulled her back, not out of doubt, but because he knew the truth, the battle had not yet been offered. The enemy was not yet revealed. The darkness had only spoken, and words alone could fracture empires. The silence that followed was more dangerous than any roar. It stretched, taut as a bowstring, promising the shattering of all that remained standing. The shadows receded, folding back into themselves, leaving nothing but the echo of that damning declaration. She is not the only one. The ruins stilled. The ground calmed. But neither Liora nor Kaelen could shake the weight of the warning. The fire that had once been triumph now felt like a fragile shield. The bond that had been their strength now seemed a target. And somewhere, beyond the veil of night, another presence waited, someone else destined to rise. Liora tightened her grip on Kaelen's hand, not in fear but in defiance of the doubt gnawing at her bones. Then let them rise, she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm in her veins. And we will see who burns. Kaelen's eyes locked on hers, fierce, unyielding. Yet neither of them could deny it, the story was not finished. Far from it. The darkness had only begun to speak. And as the night closed around them, the ruins holding their breath, the world itself seemed to lean closer, waiting for the war that would decide everything. This isn't over.